You know, people come to me with this profound sense of loss. They've had what they call a spiritual awakening, and they're devastated. I've lost everything, they say. My relationships don't make sense anymore. My work feels meaningless. My ambitions have evaporated. Even my sense of who I am seems to be disappearing. I thought awakening was supposed to make me feel complete, but instead I feel like I'm falling apart. And I listen to them, and I nod, because what they're describing is absolutely spiritual awakening does feel like losing everything. But here's what I want you to understand. It feels like losing everything because you are losing everything. Everything false, that is. Everything that was never really yours to begin with. And the terror you feel is not the terror of actual loss. It's the terror of recognizing that what you thought was solid ground beneath your feet was always just a dream. Let me explain what I mean. From the moment you were born, you've been given an identity. Your parents gave you a name. Society gave you a role. Your culture gave you beliefs, values, expectations, and gradually, layer by layer, you constructed something called myself. This self had preferences, opinions, memories, hopes for the future. It had a story, where it came from, what happened to it, where it was going. And you identified with this constructed self so completely that you forgot it was a construction. You thought it was you, the real you, the solid, permanent, unchanging essence at the core of your being. And everything you did, every decision you made, every relationship you formed was organized around protecting and promoting this self. This fiction. Now, what happens in spiritual awakening is that you begin to see through the fiction. Not intellectually, anyone can understand intellectually that the ego is a construct. But experientially, you have a direct recognition that this thing you've been calling I is nothing more than a collection of thoughts, memories, and sensations loosely held together by habit and belief. There's no solid center, no unchanging core, just a flowing process, moment by moment, with no one actually in control. And this recognition is absolutely devastating. Because if there's no solid self, then who are you? If your identity is just a story, then what happens to all the things that were important to that story? Your achievements suddenly seem hollow. Who achieved them? Your relationships become confusing. Who is relating to whom? Your plans for the future collapse. Whose future is it anyway? This is why awakening feels like losing everything. You're losing the imaginary ground you were standing on. You're losing the fictional character you thought you were. You're losing the entire elaborate game of becoming somebody, getting somewhere, making something of yourself. And the mind reacts to this loss the way it would react to any loss, with grief, with fear, with desperate attempts to regain what's been lost. You try to reconstruct your old identity. You try to find new beliefs to replace the old ones. You try to fill the void with spiritual concepts, new practices, new goals, anything to avoid the naked recognition that there is no one there, that there never was. But you see, this is where most people misunderstand what's happening. They think the loss is the problem, and they need to find a way to restore what's been lost. They think awakening has broken something that needs to be fixed. But the loss is not the problem, the loss is the solution. What you're losing was always the source of your suffering. The imaginary self, with its endless needs and fears and desires, was the problem all along. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine you're watching a film, and you've become completely absorbed in it. You've identified with the protagonist. When he's in danger, your heart races. When he suffers, you suffer. When he triumphs, you feel triumphant. The story has become your story. His feelings have become your feelings. Now, what happens if someone suddenly reminds you that it's just a film, that the protagonist isn't real, that none of it is actually happening? There's a moment of disorientation, isn't there? A sense of loss, because the investment you had in that story, the emotional reality of it, suddenly becomes absurd. And yet, nothing real has been lost. No one actually died or suffered. It was always just images on a screen. This is what spiritual awakening reveals. The story of your life, the character called you, is like that film. It's not that your life is meaningless or unimportant. The film can still be appreciated, enjoyed, engaged with. But the desperate identification with the character, the belief that you are that character and that your survival depends on how the story turns out, that's what collapses. And yes, it feels like losing everything because you've invested everything in that identification. Now, here's the difficult part. You can't simply decide to stop identifying with the character. You can't think your way out of it or will your way out of it, because the very you that would be trying to escape is itself part of the identification. It's like trying to lift yourself up by your own bootstraps. It can't be done. What happens instead is that the identification wears itself out. Through seeing, through awareness, through simply observing the process without trying to control it, the false self gradually loses its power over you. Not because you've defeated it or transcended it, but because you've seen through it. And once you've truly seen through something, you can't unsee it. This process of seeing through the false self is what causes the feeling of loss. Every time you see through another belief, another attachment, another identity, there's a little death. And spiritual awakening is not one death, it's 1,000 deaths. The death of who you thought you were, the death of what you thought life was supposed to be, the death of your certainty, your security, your solid ground. People often speak of spiritual awakening as if it's a single event, one dramatic moment of enlightenment after which everything is clear and settled. But this is rarely how it works. More often, it's a gradual process of dissolution. Things that once seemed important gradually lose their grip on you. Relationships that were based on your false identity naturally fall away or transform. Ambitions that were really just attempts to prove your worth become transparently absurd.